All right, everybody, how you doing today? Welcome to Class 5 of Recording Studio Fundamentals, Spring 2022, Copland School of Music. I am back in my home studio, familiar territory, got a better microphone, better room acoustics. I'm surrounded with all my toys, so I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable, although I thought we had some good work done over the past 4 weeks. Now, we're a little light on students, so hopefully they'll get here. And we have had, unfortunately, a couple of students left school this semester. I think 2 or 3 students in this class withdrew from the college. They were having issues, so I feel bad for them. And I'm just waiting for most people to get here today, and then I've got a few things to say to the class. But overall, the work, you've gotten your feedback video. I uploaded one yesterday for you guys. I got around to everything yesterday morning. And, overall good work, it'll get better the more you do it. It's like practicing, the more you work on your instrument, the better you get at it. The more you do this work, the better you get at it. And, hey, there we go. Okay. All right, we've got a few more students here. So, any questions before we start on today's lesson? No? All right. This class is going to be broken up into 2 sections, and the first part of the class I won't be able to put up on YouTube. So if you're watching this during the week, you'll have to go to class materials for class 5 on our OneDrive to see it, because this will definitely get blocked. The Beatles are big blockers on YouTube. So we're going to be taking a look today at something that I think is really interesting. At least it's interesting for me. But let me preface that by saying one of the things about this work that's different than, let's say, doing something on a notation software is that as you work, you're creating the story and you are hearing it back. And as you are working and editing and putting your track together, you should also be mixing your track. You should be listening to the balance of instruments, what's the focus point, what's the accompaniment, and making sure that the focus is clear and you can hear it, but that it's not so loud that it drowns out the rest of the track, and also the accompaniment not so loud that it drowns out the focus or the melody or whatever you want to be in focus at the moment. And that focus can change over the course of a piece. And that's part of this study. It's not just this bit where we're like, playing keyboards and we're moving, using a trim tool or a grabber or moving notes around, changing durations, changing start times, all this stuff. All of that should be in service of creating a narrative from the beginning to the end. And one of the big things about that is the presentation. And mixing is like the most important thing about mixing is volume balance, right? And that can be on multiple levels, right? So for one level is how loud is one instrument versus another instrument? How loud is what's coming out of your right ear versus what's coming out of your left ear? You can move it into an individual instrument, like when you're listening to the drum kit. What's doing the most important part of the drum kit, and that changes in every type of song. The kick drum, how loud is that compared to the snare drum and the hi-hats? Which one is more important? And that not only changes from song to song, but that can change inside of a song multiple times, right? So you're always listening and shaping, right? Just have this image of a somebody who's a sculptor and they've got a clay on a wheel and the wheel is spinning around and they're just shaping it. And then as they're doing one section, they're looking at the proportion between the ear and the nose. And then they go, they're just always reshaping that as they're going along. So there's, this kind of fluid presentation of the music, and you will develop these skills if you do this long enough, and by the end of the semester you will develop them more than when we started. So in terms of volume, right, there's also the volume of the room. Like, does something sound like it's closer to you and the volume of the ambience of the room is less, or does it sound like it's further away where the dry sound is softer than the ambience of the room? When you're using something like equalization to carve out space so that one sound fits in nicely with the next, it's frequency dependent volume control. And we'll touch on that a little bit once we start dealing with audio. So all these things are really important. And what I thought was would be really interesting to spend a little bit of time today before we get back into the MIDI lesson, is listening to 3 mixes of the same album. So when Sgt Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band came out in 1967, it kind of revolutionized the way that music was produced. Typically before this, musicians would go into the studio and they would have rehearsed their music and it would have gotten recorded. Or let's say it was Frank Sinatra with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra. Nelson would write arrangements. There'd be like some rehearsals and then they'd do a take. And basically in a day they'd get half an album, and then in another day they'd get another half an album. The Beatles did their first album in a day. They were songs that they had been playing over and over again for years in Hamburg, at the Cavern Club in London, and they just went in there and they recorded their first album and they just played their repertoire. So as technology moved forward and it started becoming possible to record something and then record another take and have those two playing back simultaneously, and another take and another take, and have 4 tracks of music playing simultaneously, 4 lanes on an analog tape. That started changing things because you had more possibilities. You could build up a song from the bottom up and make decisions as you were going along. And the studio was becoming part of the compositional process, much like the computer is part of the compositional process now. Your ability of using the computer and all your technical facility with using it, using the software, all the tools, your understanding. And when you combine all that with your musicality, that all becomes part of the compositional process. It's much different than Bach sitting there with a manuscript and his harpsichord writing stuff out, or just dictating it out and having somebody else notate it for him, or however that went on back then. That was totally different, right? You had the paper, which was king. You didn't hear it unless you were Bach. He heard it in his head until the performance. With what we're doing here, you're capturing performances and adding performances together to create a larger scale performance. And you have tools to enhance the performance, to fix rhythms, to change timbres, to experiment with different sounds without really worrying about $200 an hour for a recording studio. You can do it in your laptop. You know, when I recorded the Special Olympics World Game theme for ESPN, and that was like 6 years ago, I had 20 brass players at the power station. It used to be called Avatar, but the power station at Berkeley, which is one of the last big studios left in New York. And, you know, the studio was charging me $300 an hour. I had 20 musicians They were making, like, I don't know, $120 an hour each. And if I made a mistake and we had to redo something, or if I made a mistake in the notation and it took 10 or 15 minutes to fix it, I was losing out on hundreds of dollars per minute, right? Well, you don't really have that worry when you've got your laptop. Your time is what you're losing out on, and you can close your computer, open it up the next day, and it comes back just as you left it if you've saved it properly. You don't have to worry about patching effects in. You don't have to worry about resetting the console and, are things in the same spot with the microphone? Is it different? Is the room as humid as it was yesterday or as dry as it was yesterday? All these things that can affect the sound of an instrument when you're recording onto tape, though you don't have to worry about those things inside the computer. There are other things you have to worry about, but not those things. So the studio became part of the compositional process. And in 1967, the Beatles parked themselves inside of Abbey Road Studios for months, and they worked on this album. And they would come in with little sketches of songs, and they'd play them for George Martin and the other, if it was like if Paul wrote a song, he'd play it on the guitar or the piano, and they'd all sit around and listen to it. And then George Martin would have some suggestions, and then they'd work it out. Like, let's say that it was a song with a rhythm section. Well, they'd work out so that they get a good drum and bass track, and maybe they would record those two onto one track of the audio, and then maybe they would get good guitar tracks, and that would be on a second track of the tape machine. And then maybe there'd be some keyboards, and that would go on the third track, right? So they were just building these tracks up from the bottom up, or from whatever instrument was the most important thing. And they didn't use a click track. They used whoever was playing. Maybe they piped a metronome in. I know that the song Blackbird by the Beatles, there's like this little click in the background, and they recorded a metronome, and Paul was playing along with the metronome, and they just left it in because it's like a percussion instrument. They sort of justified it that way. And then as they're recording things, they're taking sounds and they're processing them, and they're recording those processed sounds and coming up with new and unusual sounds. And they're experimenting around with technology. There's this famous story of they're recording Revolver, and John Lennon wrote this song, Tomorrow Never Knows, which is based upon the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it starts off with this crazy drum groove, with Ringo, and they've processed his drums, and they make him sound like it's really edgy and it's sort of exploding out of the speakers. And John wanted his voice to sound like he was the Dalai Lama singing from the top of the Himalayan mountains. And, they couldn't come up with anything that satisfied him. So eventually they decided to run his microphone through something called a Leslie speaker. And last week, when we went over the virtual instruments, we looked at the organ, and I talked a little bit about the rotating speaker and the horn. Well, nobody ever thought of putting a microphone through there. So they had to figure out a way to, and we'll learn about this when we start recording later on in the semester, but they had to learn about how to get a microphone level signal loud enough into the Leslie speaker. They had to create a box that would help them do that, right? So they had the engineers and the electricians that worked at Abbey Road Studios. They worked together to do this, and they fed Lennon's voice through this Leslie speaker, and they recorded that, and it was the first time that had ever been done. And then that effect became incredibly popular with guitar players because they started putting guitars through Leslie speakers. And that very famous sound in the 60s, and so much so that they make foot pedals to do that now, the same effect, right, for guitar players. And so the not only for just writing music and getting their parts well played did the studio become part of the compositional process, but using the studio and all of the electronic gadgets in the studio to create new and unusual timbres and textures became part of the compositional process. And was vastly different. So what they did with Sgt. Pepper's was they had 2 4-track machines. Well, let's go back. What you typically did was you would record instruments onto 3 tracks of a 4-track machine, and then you do what's called a reduction mix, where you would bounce those 3 tracks onto the remaining track, and then that would give you 3 tracks left over. By the time that they got to Sgt. Pepper's, what they had decided, but the downside of that method is that you would then erase the original tracks, right? And you record over them, so they'd be lost forever. That's the reduction mix could not be retweaked. By the time they got to Sgt. Pepper's, what they started doing was recording onto all 4 tracks of the 4-track machine, and then doing a reduction mix onto another tape machine, thereby preserving the original tracks. So let's go and change something that I said earlier. Let's say that the Beatles are in the studio recording. They might record the drums onto 1 track of the tape. They might record the bass onto another track of the tape. They might record the piano on the 3rd track and maybe an acoustic guitar on the 4th track, or a guide vocal, right? Well, what they would then do is, let's say they were going to erase the guide vocal. They would not touch that one, but they would take those 3 tracks, the bass, the drums, and the piano, and they would mix those down onto a second 4-track machine onto 1 track. And then they would fill up the other 3 tracks on that second machine and do the reverse back onto the first machine, but they'd replace the tape so that they always retained a lot of separation in the tracks, and that's going to become important in the story I'm about to finish telling you. Now, they finished recording all the music, and then they had all this stuff archived, all these tapes archived and kept in the vaults at Abbey Road, if they have that kind of thing, but they were all in storage. So the first mix of Sgt. Pepper's, they took them 3 weeks to make that mix, and that was done in mono, meaning that nothing in the left ear, everything equal volume in both ears. Everything just sort of sounds like it's coming at you in the middle. And that's how a vast majority of mixes were made back then, and I've sort of indicated in earlier classes why that was the case. And that was the case because a lot of this music was being played on an AM car radio in 1967, or in like little sort of Victrolas that people had at their house that were, just a turntable with a single speaker in it, right? We had one of those when I was a little kid. And that was the listening medium was in mono. But stereo was starting to become, even though stereo had been around for a while, it was starting to become more prevalent. So they spent 3 weeks on the mono mix, and they only spent a couple of days on the stereo mix. So they released the mono mix in the UK, and I believe they released the stereo mix in the United States. And then over time, this 3-day mix became what most people were used to listening to, because when they started releasing stereo a couple of years later in the UK, they just released the mix that they had made for the American market. So the mono mix was the original mix. Then the stereo mix came out in, at the same time, but was targeted for America. In 2009, they took the stereo mix and they remastered it, right? Meaning that they just reprocessed it and cleaned things up a little bit and maybe brought up the levels and sharpened things up a bit. But they really didn't go back and rebalance the entire album. Then in 2017, they released a 3rd mix in which George Martin, who was the producer of the Beatles, his son Giles, went through the archives and took all of the original takes, compiled everything inside of Pro Tools, as many individual instruments as he could, not the reduction mixes, and made sure that, everything, all the count-ins lined up perfectly. It was all sample accurate. And then he remixed the entire album, having much more control over all of the individual instruments, making it a more modern mix. And yeah, so it's just an interesting that you've got now these three very different sounding versions of the songs. So we're going to take a listen to sections of each of these and see how they differ. Any questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to pick up with this track that I started writing last week. Right, we're working on an original composition, and it's next week the first draft is going to be due. Let me just talk about a couple of things, just in general. Right, this area here, resize these things to make them customized for you. So, for example, I've got this. There's a lot of space here. I don't need to have that all showing, so I can pull this over. As long as I can read these instruments, that's fine. And that gets you a little bit more space here. I've got this set up where I don't have the I/O, the audio I/O visible. That gets us a little more space, right? So that's good. And then make sure that some of you don't have the track color selected. So just that needs to be selected. And when you're saving, this is not everybody does this, but enough do this that I want to make a comment about it. And I've talked about it on the review on your feedback videos. So before you leave Pro Tools, Before you leave Pro Tools, you will hit the return key so that you're back at measure 1. You will also do something. You will do Control, Option, and the letter A for all, and watch the screen. The entire session the entire timeline gets put on the screen, right? And then notice how I've got these tracks are all highlighted here, right? I don't want to have them highlighted. So I'm just going to do Option and click on any of them, and they're not highlighted. Okay. So you've done that. And then what you would do is save. And then if you want to leave this session, don't close that, right? And then leave the session, because then when I open it up, that's not visible. If you do hide that and you can't see it, you can go here to view, and you could do the show the edit window, right? But or the window over here, show edit window. Let's see, where is it? Anyway, there's a key command. It's Command and the equal sign. We'll make, whoops, I've got to get Pro Tools back up. Command and the equal sign. We'll bring it back. So that's how you can do that. So now this is the way that you've got the track, your piece. So just save that. And if you want to quit Pro Tools, just do Command and the letter Q, like with any other program. And if you want to close the session but keep Pro Tools open so that you can work on something else, the key command for that is Command Shift. So I'm pushing both of those down, and the letter W. Right? So that's closed, but Pro Tools has not quit. It's still here. So I can open Recent. Boom. And then see how it opens up exactly as I've left it. All right. So that's a good habit to get into. So let's review what I've done so far. Is that distorted at all in your headphones? Because it's pretty hot level. I'm just looking at this over here. No, yes, no. No? Okay, great. All right, so let's go back to the beginning. Now, this is something that I like to do with the drum tracks, okay? You see how the drum tracks are all different lengths? I want to make that so that it's easier for me to see. So what I'm going to do is I open up the editor and I'm just going to do Command A, and I'm going to select everything. And then remember, I showed you a little bit about the event list last time. So I'm going to open up any event list function. So I'll just do Option and 0, which will open up quantize. But I'm going to go into this area here and I'm going to go to change duration, right? And I'm going to set everything to 240 ticks. That's this number here. And I'll explain that in a second. So I've done that. And then I hit enter so that the number goes in. And then I have to hit apply, which you can either click on this blue box here or you can hit the enter key again. And watch when I hit the enter key again, what happens to all the lengths of these notes. See how they all become the same length. That is totally fine for a vast majority of drum tracks, and that becomes something where you can see what the rhythm is a little bit easier. All right? Now, I haven't talked about it in this class yet, but just maybe I mentioned it a little bit. But let me get the big counter out. The big counter. So this is the same as this up here, but it's big so you can see it. And what this is useful for is in recording studios, they'll have the Pro Tools session here, and then maybe like up against the back wall, they'll have another monitor, and this will be the only thing in that monitor. Or maybe they feed this out into the recording studio if you're doing a film date, so that like everybody knows what. Like if you're a musician and you get lost in the music, you can look up and see the counter and see where you are, right? So they'll have it like on a huge monitor. Sometimes you see it on film scores, and you can read those numbers all over the studio. So this is handy, but we don't need to use this in our work here. And this shows, you can set this to show anything that's in the ruler. All right, so this is bar, beats, and then these three numbers here are subdivisions of the beat, right? And there are, in Pro Tools, and I go over this in much more detail in Audio MIDI 1, there are 960 subdivisions between each beat, right? That's the resolution of the beat. So there are 960 spots between each beat where a note can fit. So those of us that are trained graduate students, and anybody who's a music major in this class or had music lessons, you'll know that let's say you're in 4/4 time, 4 beats to a measure, quarter note gets the beat. Every quarter note has a subdivision. The basic subdivision of a quarter note is an eighth note, meaning that there are 2 eighth notes between each beat. So if this is a beat, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are eighth notes. So there's 8 eighth notes in a measure. Then 16th notes would be 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so there's 16 16th notes in each measure, or 4 for each beat. So there are 2 eighth notes in each beat, and there are 4 16th notes in each beat. And then triplets, there's 3 eighth note triplets in each beat. There's 3 quarter note triplets in every 2 beats. So these are just subdivisions that, as musicians, we know. Now, you just need to know that on the counter, 0 is the first part of the beat. Okay? So it's not 1. It's not 1. That's not the first part of the beat. The first part of the beat is 3 zeros. So that would be every quarter note. So if I go to beat 2, right? You see that beat 2 starts on 3 zeros. All right, so it's a little tricky because we're used to counting on 1, right? But with this, you're starting your counting on 0. If I go to beat 3, again, This hasn't changed. So let me go back to beat 1. And if I want an eighth note, if there's 960, the resolution is 960 subdivisions. Those subdivisions are called ticks, T-I-C-K-S. And if there's 960 ticks, 480 times 2 is 960. So if I put 480 in here, that is an eighth. That's the second eighth note of a beat. And let me show you on the MIDI editor. Right. And let me zoom in on this. Get this centered. Right. So this right here is beat 1, bar 1, measure beat 1, and this is bar 1, beat 2. And you'll see that there are 4 grid lines between there. So that would mean that there's 16th notes. In the middle of that is 480. We've got the resolution of our grid at 16th notes, which is 240. So the first eighth note starts at 3 zeros. The second eighth note starts at 480. So that's how that eighth notes are divided up. 0, 0, 0, and 480. The first 16th note starts also on 3 zeros. The second 16th note starts on 240. The third 16th note starts on 480. And the fourth 16th note starts on 720. So that's just basically dividing 960 into 4 equal segments. 0, 0, 0, 240, 480, and 720. And then with eighth note triplets, it's 0, 320, 640. So I'm not great with math. I just have those memorized from doing this over and over again, right? So that's the basic thing about those ticks. And we'll have to think about that when we're working with quantizing. So if we look at these, right, we've made these all a 16th note or 240 ticks. So, I can look at this and see that this looks like a nice, I can see what the rhythm is right there very easily. Excuse me. Right? It just makes it a little bit easier for me personally to read. This is a personal style thing that I do. I'm not saying that everybody does this, but this reminds me, remember when I showed you Boom and we looked at that grid where all the different drum hits were and everything? This kind of looks like that. So I'm just trying to keep things consistent, and I can read that very easily. And you will too if you do this a little often. It's not a secret. It's not rocket science. So that's the first thing, is I've made all my notes here be the same length. And that's good. And now let me listen to the bass and the drums together. Now, a couple things, right? With the bass track, now you can write any kind of music you want. If you want to write a piece of classical music, it's fine, whatever. You don't have to do this like pop jazz stuff that I've done here. Whatever floats your boat, I'm happy with that. But notice if you're doing bass parts, right? Bass parts have space in them. Right? And it's not this. That doesn't have the right flavor, right? But, boom, beat up, bum, 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 right? This is, or you could do something like this. So right? You see how I changed the rhythm there, and it's got a different flavor. I changed the spacing of the notes on this pickup into the downbeat, right? But if I made this completely long, it's got a little bit more. That's good too. But what I think is not good would be to have both these be long. it loses some of the drive. So having variations and having long notes and short notes, I'll tell you, long notes typically happen, right? More toward at the beginning of the measure more often. There's no hard, fast rule. You just have to listen. Okay, so that's the first thing is just, first couple things there. And I guess on this other one, I've got my hi-hats here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I have the hi-hats on a secondary instrument. So I'm just going to, I don't have to open up the MIDI editor to do any treatment of this track, right? So if I do Option 0 and I go back to change duration, it stays the same at 240. Now notice that the hi-hat track is highlighted. And if I hit I don't have to hit enter because it's already set up. If I hit apply, those all become the same duration. And then that becomes something that's easier for me to look at and see what's happening. It doesn't change the performance. The drum note, you hit the keyboard, and like for example, here. You can't see that. Let's see. Right, so I'm hitting that note and I'm holding it down. If I do it short, same sound. Right? That's the way almost every drum sound is programmed. That you hit it and it does the full amount of the sound. Unlike a piano, different, or a bass, right? Different. So the envelope of the drums has a lot of what's called the envelope. It has a lot of release to it. Okay. All right, so remember that I took the kick drum and merge paste it into this track in order to create the bass line. If I can't play keyboards well, that's a good way to have a nice way to start with creating a bass line. So I did miss one of the notes though, so let me capture that right here. So I'm just going to copy that, go here, and then merge paste, which is Option and the letter M like Mary. All right, so I need to know what my chord progression is on the piano, so let me open that up. Whoops. B flat minor, E flat 7. Looks to be an A half diminished. Right, to a D7 of some sort. So B flat, E flat, A, and D. So let's go right here to the bass. And now let me show you another trick. So if I click right here, it's going to open the bass up from the beginning of the track, right? If I want it to open here, I can just take the selector tool, and then right near this area, I can put the playback head and just use the key command and the letter E, like Elroy, and that will, you see, it just separated that out like that. There's a little separation there now, and then that can be fixed later if you want. And then if I click here, it will open up right where I want to be. So that's a cool shortcut. So let's solo this. So we got B flat. Boom. So let's make all these B flats right now. Just let's get our basic progression together. And this is A. These are all Ds, right? There should be an E flat. So let me listen for a second. So I think this is going to be an E flat here. And I'm actually going to make this longer because that doesn't give me enough. And we're going to have to play around with this here, right? So let's just listen to this with the track. So I have to unsolo that piano. So this could be a little bit longer. And this could be a different pitch. Maybe I'll go up to the F, give me the fifth. Right. Boom, B. I made it an E, that's why it sounded bad. Doom, dee, doom. Right, so doom, and then this can be A half diminished, has an E flat in it. So this is ba ba ba, right? So I can just bring this over, bop. Da, da, da. And then da da da. And then I have to change the kick drum. So let's now work on our kick drum here. Bring this over. Now, I don't work like this. I can play all this stuff in on the keyboard, right? I'm trying to show you ways where you can create something if you don't have great keyboard skills. There are times where I do this kind of work, but typically I try to play stuff in and it's just quicker for me. So, but there are, there are ways to create if you get your editing skills together where you don't have to be like a virtuoso on a keyboard. But as musicians, we should all have basic keyboard skills. They're, no matter what instrument you play, they're so essential in writing, in understanding the structure of a piece of music, and it just basic keyboard skills, just very essential for every musician. There's this famous story that Miles Davis used to always rag on Cannonball Adderley because Cannonball didn't know keyboards that well and he didn't know harmonies. But Miles could sit there and figure out all the harmonies to all the songs. And when I was a graduate student at Queens College, I took arranging for a year with Professor Heath. And Jimmy, great, one of the best saxophone players, best arrangers. He wasn't a great pianist, but he could sit there and play every tune and play a tune like the verse 3 or 4 times in a row, and every time through he would play a different harmonization, and each one was just as good as the last one because he understood how to make chords at the keyboard, and it helped his playing. So everybody should have some basic keyboard fundamental skills, but but let me show you how to do stuff without this. Now, we don't have hi-hats, so I can just duplicate this. Right, so let me just, how did I do that? Let's see, let's get back here. So I highlighted this, right? It's got the whole thing, and Command and the letter D just duplicates it. Okay, so let's play around with that a little. Let's do this. Dun, dit, da, tum, dit, dit, tum. Now, that sounds very square, right? So we need to quantize that the same that we did before. So I just highlighted all that stuff by dragging like this, right? Clicking and dragging. Just clicking and dragging with the mouse S. An extra keyboard, an extra camera view this time. A little more helpful. All right, so Option and the letter 0. And notice that we've got our swing, we've got our swing set up like the last time already for this. So I'm just going to apply that. And it didn't do what I wanted it to do. Let's see. Nope. Let's just pick these 16th notes here and swing them. No, it's not doing it, right? Okay, so it's a little bit square, so we'll do this manually. We'll do it by ear, which is also very good. So I'm going to make the dun, 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 right? I'm going to make that 16th note a little bit later, so that means that I'm going to have to shorten up the duration because it's going to fit in, it's going to drag over to this. So I've got all those selected, and I'm going to go to slip mode, which is this one right here, and just click and drag like that. And then I'm going to take the grabber tool right here and just make these a little bit later like that. Let's hear what that sounds like. Much better, right? It's got a little bit more of a swing to it. And what we can do now is, again, mixing doom, doom to doom, doom to doom. Right? I'm just using the pencil tool and editing those velocities. And then now maybe like at the end of every measure here in the bridge, let me see if there's a different sound I can use. Let's see what that sounds like, right? So the way I moved that around was I used the up and downward facing, the upward and downward arrow. And I'm just going through and listening to that open hi-hat. Nice, but maybe I will make that softer. It's a little loud and dramatic, right? You know, I'm not sure that that's great, but I'm just going to leave it for now. And just listen to how I'm going to solo out the hi-hat. They have this programmed so that if I were to just play this note, right, it lasts. But if I play this note and the closed hi-hat right after it, it closes right up like a real player. So that's programmed to do that. And a vast majority of drums that you're going to play and program, they're set up the same way on the keyboard, with the low C being the kick drum, and then the snare drum is, you know, cross stick, snare drum, claps, another snare drum, then toms, and then these black keys are the hi-hats. And then once you're up in here, you're getting into cymbals, and then here there's some like cowbell. Yeah. So, okay, so we've got that there. And then let's duplicate that. And then let's see. I'm going to just delete that. All right, so. So let me open up this MIDI editor here, and right here, let me delete that. And let's make that last note ring out, right? Good. And now we need our cross stick, right? So let me show you another trick. Let me open this up. Let me go to grid mode here, right? And then I'm just going to slide and select these cross sticks. I'm going to copy those with Command C. I'm going to switch to the selector, and notice that starts on 2. So let me go here and let me zoom in on this so you can see it. I'm at measure 5, beat 2, and then I will do Option and the letter M like Mary, and it will merge paste those in there without erasing our kick drum. All right, so that's merge pasting. Very let's move that like we did with the other. And then we're back into the groove again, right? So I would go back to the beginning and paste that in there. So now we're back at the very opening. So we can just copy this and just paste that in there, which is Command V. Okay, so I need a note I need something at the end. And we don't need all of these kick drums here. Let's see. So I'm just going to delete those. Now, I've got this set up, right? Remember I told you last week some people did it? Whoops, excuse me. Jeez. I got the wrong keys. Sorry, I'm making everybody dizzy. All right, so let me zoom in on this. Right, this little guy right here is MIDI merge, meaning that I can play something and not erase any of the MIDI information that's in there. So I've got that in there. If I start playing here and I want to have the bass come in right here, I can just start playing here. And then, or I could just start recording right here. So I could just hit the 3 or the Command Shift, right? You don't even have to have the count off on. You can just play. Right? Okay, so that, and now I've got this other electric piano pad. Whoops. Geez, my computer screen's out of control here. I've got that accessibility thing where I can zoom in and out of and make things bigger and smaller, and sometimes I hit the wrong modifier key over here. All right, so we've got this pad. So I'm going to come in right here. So now look what I did. So I'm playing. I hit the record function. See how it starts recording? And then I can play starting right there. Because I've got MIDI merge on, which is this guy up here, I'm not going to erase anything. So this is just ways to speed up your workflow, right? If you can play it all. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to play the chords. Okay, and then I'm going to leave that. I'm going to just take this part here, and I'm going to quantize that. Right? Great. Okay, so we need like so I'm listening to this, right? And I've got all these drums over here. I don't need these here now because I've got drums here that I can use. So, right, I just did Control Option A, everything fit in there. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, you know what? This could use an introduction, right? So watch what I'm going to do here, all right? I'm going to select this, hold the Shift key down, and just start clicking until everything, the entire track is selected, okay? All 5 of these tracks are selected. Then I'm going to go to my grabber tool, which is up here, and I'm going to slide this back so that it starts on bar 5, and that will give me 4 measures up front for an intro. So notice I don't have my hand on any key here. That's all selected. I can just click and make sure your grid is on, okay? And I'm just going to drag this so that it starts at measure 5. And then well, this didn't get moved, so I'll move it now. That's fine. Okay, so now I've got 4 bars up front open. Right? No problem. I could just take these 2 bars of drums, just like that, copy those, hit the return key so that I'm back at 1, hold, and I'm going to hold the shift key, and then both of these are selected now, and I'm just going to paste those in there. And then I can duplicate that, and boom, everything's in there. Now, maybe what I would do with this would be, maybe there's no cross stick on the intro, right? So I could just go like this and just hit delete, and they're all gone, and we've got now something happened there, and we got duplicated notes, which happens a lot. Oh, maybe we don't. Yeah, right here we've got lots of duplicated notes. So that's got weird there, but you can see right here there's a lot of stalk heads for 2 notes. So I'm just going to, if I delete this, there's another note under there, and the same with this. All right, so let me get my count off again, and I'm going to go with the electric piano pad, and I'm going to just do a simple, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, I'm going to play that again. Since I've got merge record on, it will overdub that, but I don't want that. So I'm going to turn MIDI merge off. And then I just have to make sure that I get off before the beginning of this here. Now, if I record now, 2, 3, 4, up, one more time. See how it erased everything? One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, D, D. I need to stop before the next bit comes in. Good. Let's listen. Got the bass here. Right? I'm going to just be playing stuff like I can't play keyboards, right? And two, three, four. Two, three, four. Make sure I'm done. And we'll do something at the piano at the beginning, right? 1, 2, very simple. I just played one note and held it out. Now, I'm still feeling like I would like more of a groove to come in before the form comes in. So in other words, I would like there to be this establish that, right? And then the song melody would start right here, right? Instead of going to that those series of 2/5 chords. So what we're going to do is just the same thing we did before. We're just going to copy all this stuff here, right? Copy. And then we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. Oh, I didn't get the hi-hat. So let's get all that in there. So copy, make sure I'm copying everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. So right there. So I'm just going to, so in other words, right? Everything is selected. I'm going to hold the shift key down and go right here to measure 9. And then I'm going to, let me make sure I've copied everything, right? Command C, hold the shift key down and go right here and Command V. And I've pasted that in. So now I've got a nice 4-bar, I've got a nice 8-bar introduction, right? That builds. Okay, so there was a little mistake there. Right here, you see that there's some stuff that got added there because, and you just have to clean that up, right? Because I didn't play that perfectly, so it didn't start right on the downbeat. So you just have to clean that up. No big deal. All right, now, another way to copy and move things around would be using the Option key. So I'm going to highlight this with the grabber tool, right? Hold the Option key down, click and drag. Right there. See that? Let me do that one more time. This is a standard computer on many applications. You select something, Option, click, drag. Right, so now I've got... Okay, so we've got about 46 seconds worth of music so far. So let me take a listen from the beginning. So I hit the return key and make sure I can see everything. And let me just think about, I'm thinking about it, right? What do I need? What could work well? There needs to be a melody. But is anything else that I'm missing? There was a little wrong note in the bass there, right? No, my ears are playing tricks on me. Okay, so I'm listening now, and the volume of the piano is starting to bother me. It's way too loud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here to my MIDI volume, not my audio volume, but my MIDI volume, and I'm going to drag that down. So I bring down about, let's try it at about 70. And a good thing to do when you're balancing these things out is I'm going to solo the piano and solo the electric piano and hear what the combination of those two sounds. Right, that's too soft. So that... And now I'm going to do the same thing with the bass and the drums. So the bass is too loud, so I'm going to bring that down and listen. Now, let me show you guys something that I want you to start getting used to doing. Now, at some point before the semester's ending, I'm going to show you a way to do this where you can actually have numbers to shoot for. But right now we have our output meters here. So when you're working, you should have your output meters selected. And you want to keep a vast majority of your music between, this doesn't have any numbers on it, but between halfway up and 75% of the way up. You don't want to be in the red, right? If it's in the red, that's going to distort. So I was in the red before, and so I wanted to just... Right, so it's a little bit, this whole track is just a little bit too loud because you could see these amber lines here on the top that sort of hang out. That's your peak volume, right? These up here. So what I think is also a little bit too loud is the hi-hat. So I'm going to bring the volume on my hi-hats down. And the cross stick's a bit loud. So I'm just mixing as I'm going along. So I'm going to do that with velocity. So now the cross sticks are all on the same note. They're right here, right? So I could just click and drag across and select all those. But I could also, if I click on this, notice that this C sharp gets highlighted gray. So if I click on that, it will select all of them. See that? So that's a quick way to select all of those notes. And then I'm just going to bring down the velocity on all of them just a little. And my output is looking better here too. All right, so you know, I'm missing, like, there could be kind of guitar could work really well here, but you know, playing MIDI guitar, I'm not sure about that. What if I put in some strings, right? Let's see if there's, so I go to strings and let's see. Let's try soft strings. And I'm going to name the track Strings. Okay, so I can tell already that's going to be too loud, so I'm going to bring the volume down here. And let's play it from the top. Oh, sorry. So I don't like that sound. It's too thin. That sounds a little better. All right, so I'm going to record that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I've just recorded that strings, right? But if any of you know how a violin works, the bow is going across the strings and the violinist can animate the sound as the sound progresses through its entire duration. So in other words, they just don't go ba, and they can add vibrato as they're going along. So we can emulate that by doing some basic automation. Now, I'm going to go over again this stuff next week, all right? A lot of this stuff. Just do the best you can with what I'm showing you today. Yeah, just do the best you can with all this stuff, right? Just try to make your stuff as musical as possible. You don't have to use all these techniques, but I'm just exposing you to them. So if I open this up here, right? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make all my velocities for this be the same so that I can have a consistent level with all of this stuff. And the way I did that was I selected all the notes and I just used the trimmer tool. I dragged all the way up to the top and then back down to about a moderate level. So I don't want them to be too loud. And my first note really needs to start on the downbeat. So that note is just static. It's just standing there. It's not doing anything, right? We can automate the volume. And the way that we can do that, I teach two ways. And for this class, I'll teach MIDI, automating MIDI volume. Whoops, excuse me. Let me get this in the middle here and zoom in. So this little box here, anytime you see any kind of box or area that has a triangle or an arrow, that means that there is a sub menu located there with other options. So this is the lane view selector. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to select MIDI volume, right? And it opens up this stagnant line. You do not see the velocity stalks anymore. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the pencil tool. And when you use the pencil tool right at the beginning, what I want you guys to use is the straight line just until you get your technique together, and then you can freehand it. And so we're going to select line, all right? And then I'm going to draw in a crescendo, which means it's going to start off soft, just like that. So in other words, instead I clicked from, I want to maybe crescendo up over one bar. So I'm going to start at bar 2, click, and diagonally drag backwards and make an angle. Let's listen to that. Right? You could see that it got louder, right? So maybe what I'll do, what I'll do this time is do a little bit of a decrescendo to the second note, and then the same thing up to there, and then a big decrescendo down. I'm just drawing all that in. Okay, so let's ask a question. Does it get too loud? Does it start off too soft? Does the loud part get too loud? And how's the fade out? Right? So those are the three questions. And how is the note transitions? So let's listen to it again and listen to how it balances out with the rest of the instruments and see if we can make a determination. Fades in nicely, fades out nicely. I think myself personally, I have opinions. Anybody out there have an opinion? All right. It gets too loud. So there's two ways you can deal with that. You can use the trim tool up here, and then you can just hover in this area and everything will, see how I did that? Everything went down. Or if I want to undo that, or I could just redraw it so that it's not so, it doesn't get so loud. So let's try like this, right? And then let's make it go down so that it gets really soft, and back up and then down. So let's listen to that. Nice, right? Now, there's this thing where notes end with orchestral instruments, and everybody's different, and you have to make a decision based upon what's best. So when I used to sub at Phantom of the Opera in 1988, before all of you probably were born, it was an education for me because I had played in orchestras before. I was in the Radio City Music Hall Orchestra for a summer. That's 45 people. But I was playing rhythm section keyboards in that. But when I was working at Phantom of the Opera, I had to play orchestral keyboards. And there used to be, I used to like to hold notes to the end of the measure because that's the duration of the note. Well, there was a difference of opinion between the French horn players and the string players in the band as to when a note should end. So the French horn players liked to end an eighth note early, and the string players liked to end at the end of the measure. So I had to learn who to listen for, who I was playing with, just to make sure that my note ends were at the same time. You can do whatever you want, but you should you should know that where notes end on orchestral instruments is very important. And especially with wind instruments, it's really important because they have to take breaths. I've had students hand in assignments, especially in film scoring, where they've got a trumpet playing for a minute straight with no place to take a breath. I mean, nobody can do that, right? You could get away with that if you dovetail two trumpet players playing, a measure each, and switching back and forth, and that's, Philip Glass-like. But you just have to imagine that. So what I'm going to do here on this one is I'm going to have this end right at the downbeat of the next measure. And I'm not going to worry about that this is a little bit early. It's not perfectly played. I'm not going to quantize that. That's because it sounds fine. Strings should be a little bit loose with sustained notes. That's fine. Now, I did that with volume, right? You can do that with virtually every parameter. That same kind of work. You can do that with panning. If you look at Expand 2, and I teach this in Audio Midi 1, it's got all of these controls here. All of these controls, you can do the same exact thing. You can, you can draw in and they'll move around and change the timbre. So maybe I'll show that next week. I don't want to get, but it can really add. So in other words, I can take the strings and I can make the softer notes sound darker than the louder notes brighter, right? And I can do that in real time by automating the cutoff frequency. I have to think if I want to go into that with this class. I want to see what you guys get into next week when you hand your first draft in. So just that, that this is like a baby steps learning how to do some slight automation. I've been throwing a lot of stuff at you. Just do as much as you can, with all this information. All right. So I've done that with the opening for the strings. So maybe I'll have the strings come back in right around here, right? So let me go right here, and I need to hear a little volume. So I'm going to just click right there, and then the volume will change automatically. Now, it's interesting, right? Let's see if I can get this correct. I'm going to show you the mixer window, which we don't typically use. No, that's not going to work. Right. Okay. Yeah, then I can get it. So as this is the volume, right? If I hit return and I play it, watch how the volume changes as see, it's going up, down and back up now, and then back down. Right. So you can see that it's actually moving the numbers. It's really cool. I automate. I do that constantly in my work, constantly with any kind of synth sound, any kind of orchestral sound. I'm always drawing that stuff in. It takes a static sound and it gives you life and animation and stuff, right? It really is really cool. Okay, so maybe I want the strings to start over here. Let's see. right in this area here. So let's start a measure early, and I can just hit, I can just hit play and then hit that. No, it didn't do it. Okay, so if I hit play and then boom. That's not bad. Let me listen to that. Okay, so the only thing that bothered me was that the second note is late, and that, it doesn't sound good, right? So I'm going to fix that right here. Right? I might make this start a little earlier, but let me just play around with this. And this comes in a little early. That's okay there. So let me draw in some automation. I'm just going to try something and see how it plays out. I'll do a little bit first. Yeah, so I have to work on my velocity. See that? That'll change the timbre. So I'm just going to draw straight across. And here we go. So it just gets too loud. So you got to really... And then right here, that's a D. This is a G minor chord. I'd like to have a couple of notes there, right? So maybe I'm going to just make a harmony note there. So I don't want to have to play it again. So if I hold the Option key down, remember, you can duplicate things by Option, click, and you can, whoops, sorry. Option, click, and I'm going to drag that down to a B flat. One more time. Let's listen to that. All right, cool. I like that. And then we got a little spot here. So this is a little bit weird, right? It seems like the rhythm there doesn't work well. Let's listen to that. See, you're always constantly... So you could see that these are a little late, right? This is the kick drum, the bass, and the piano are right on it. This is a little late, so I'm going to fix those. And I'm just going to... So if you really want to see this and get it correct, what you can do is if you click on the piano, they're both open. See that? And then you could just drag it so that, well, let me just do this again. Make sure that these are selected. And then if you want to get that really tight with the piano, if you click here and activate the piano and you've got color coordinated, you could see both of these. And I can just drag this like this. And then you can see these are color coordinated. So I can just click on those and drag those over. And then that's much tighter. There we go. Just, cleaning stuff up. There's so many ways to do this stuff. You're not going to learn everything in this semester, but I can expose you to stuff and you'll pick up what you can pick up. But the bottom line is that you just do the best you can and try to make something, that sounds good. I'd rather have something that's nice and tight and clean than something that's really fancy where you're trying all these different techniques, right? You'll learn all the different techniques as you keep doing. And we've got this. Let's take this right here, hold the Option key down, and let's get that over in this area here so we have the same thing. let's go here. And so I'm going from G minor to E flat, right? So I've got G. So this is D. So let's do the same thing we did before. We'll do, bring that down to B flat. That's up to G. And let's do, let's make the D and then B flat on that last chord. Now, interesting, right? There's 3 pitches here, but you're only hearing 1. That's because the end of this note is overlapping into the beginning of these notes. Now, this is a little technique that I teach everyone. When you've on stringed instruments, right, it's better to have the same pitches not strike the attack again. So there's an easy way to fix that. You can just hold the shift key down and select all these notes, right? And then there's a key command, Option, Shift, and the number 3. And you see that? There's no longer, watch what happens here as I do that. Option, Shift, and the number 3, or the number 3 over here. Either one works. That becomes one long note. And then just clean up the endings here. Okay, so thing is I'm missing out of my cross sticks. So let me get these over here, and that's on beat 2, and just shift drag those over like that. We don't need a kick drum there. All right, so I'm going to save. Now, I've worked on this today, right? So I want to keep a diary of my work because maybe I did some stuff that I don't like and I want to go back. I come back and listen to it the next day. I don't like it. I want to go back a couple to what I started with at an earlier time. So let me just get this all set up. So hit the return key, hit the option key, make sure that that's not set. Then do Option Shift A so that it's all, I'm sorry, Control Option A and everything's in the timeline. And I'm going to go right up here to the file and I'm going to save as. Okay. And then this comes up. I don't have this labeled as I want you guys to label, but you'd have it with our standard labeling. At the very end, you'd leave a space and then you'd go V2, right? Version 2. And then you would, every day you would have a different version and then I'd save it that way. Now, let me show you, I'm going to close this session out and not quit Pro Tools. So Command Shift W. Let me show you how that works. Oh, not Catch 98. I wanted to, okay. No, Catch 98. Okay. Right. So if I do the kind, you'll notice this is a project I'm working on. And right, I've got 4 different versions. I've got the original and then this is V2. Huh. This should actually be V3 and V4. Right, but they have different dates. So I made a little mistake there. Oops, I'll fix that later. But if we look at a different cue, I only have one version there, one version there. Yeah, some of these only have one version. But if I go here, let's see. Yeah, some of these only have one version because I write these really quickly. But you could see in that one cue that I do keep a library and a diary of all my different versions, and you should get into that habit also. It's very helpful. So, for example, if I'm working on a film and I hand in a cue, and then I'm asked to do some revisions, I do the revisions. If I save them on the original file, it will write over all that data and the last bit that you saved will be the version, right? That'll be the record of that piece. You hand it in. Now, I like the other version better. And if you don't have the other version to go back to, then you're kind of screwed. So it's always good. I like keeping diaries and, of my work, and that's archiving each iteration of a piece. I usually do every day. I'm at the point now where I don't have to archive every hour or every 2 hours. I just make decisions and I go with them. But I think that would be a good thing to do. So hold on a second. When I'm renaming through save as, correct, it will create a new .ptx file within the folder. So here, let's get this back in here. Right, so originally I only had this in here, and then today I've got both of these. Now notice that there's no audio, all the other folders are not here because I don't have any data that goes in them, right? But if I open that up again, let's just hide this window. You'll see that, and we've gone over this, but Pro Tools sets up all of these other folders, ready for content to go into that, data to go into them. So if I record some audio, it will live in this folder. And then when I close the session down, this folder will continue on. And we'll go over bounced files. We'll just go over audio files and bounced files. We will not go through clip groups and video files. That's beyond the class. And the wave cache, that just helps Pro Tools to redraw the audio waveforms. And even if you throw that out, it'll just redraw it when it opens up again. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. Continue on with your assignment. Get that first draft in. I think what I'd like to do is have the whole thing finished in 2 weeks. So you'll hand in your first draft next week, and then we'll just finish it. Just get as far as you can. I understand that this is new for a lot of you, and it's overwhelming. Just do the best you can, all right? And we'll get through this stuff. I want to start moving on because that'll be this is week 5, then 6 and 7. And then I want to start moving us into working with audio. How many of you have your recording kits from the college? If you don't have it, you have to get it. All right, my friends? I'm giving you 3 weeks notice. Get it if you don't have it. If you have your own recording kit, which is an audio interface and a microphone and a mic stand, great. But we have them there for you to sign out. I said at the beginning of the semester, just get Pro Tools set in. That's fine. But if you need that link, let's see. I can pop it into the chat. Give me 1 second. All right. So just copy that information that's in the chat and paste it somewhere on a document or something so that you can fill out that form. And you want the recording kit, and this is Justin's email at the college. He's handling that. And if you've got any trouble setting it up, email him. But you just pick it up. But just remember that it's in a Pelican case, so you might need a ride to the college or something to bring it back to your apartments. All right. There's a mic stand, so there'll be 2 pieces. There'll be a mic stand and a Pelican case. Inside this hard shell Pelican case is an audio interface, some cables, a microphone, headphones, and a windscreen. So we ordered those at the beginning of the lockdown in March of 2020, and we got them for fall of 2020 semester, and the students have been using them, and they've been really useful for everybody. It's high quality. It's not high quality stuff, but it's really you'll be able to make decent recordings with what we got, and it's not that difficult to use. All right, everyone. So I think that's quite a bit of information for today. Any questions? No, probably not. Right? It was all crystal clear. You all have it down. All right, just keep up the work. Everybody's been doing pretty good work. I gave you feedback. Hopefully that'll help you. So it's sort of like individual lessons. I find that really helpful, the feedback videos. I see students make, ever since I started doing that. I used to type out the feedback, but ever since I started making the videos and giving them to you guys, the students are making better progress, and I find that is a good thing to do. So I enjoy making them for you. Anyway, everybody have a great weekend. Hopefully it'll start warming up. Came back home with all this white sand. I mean snow on the ground, because in Florida it was pretty warm. I was at the ocean with the dog every morning, and I worked. I had a work set up. I've been working on this film for ESPN, and we handed in the first draft a week ago, and I had to make some last minute adjustments before I left, and then I should be hearing back about the second, third, and fourth acts. There'll probably be more edits that like ESPN gives the filmmakers notes, and then they have to do some editing. Hopefully it won't be too bad. And then I have to conform the music to the new edits, which is an interesting task. And we will be working on some audio editing as our first introduction to audio in 3 weeks. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend, and thank you for coming today, and I will catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.